One of the most hated artifacts in the entire history of Magic the Gathering is being reprinted in Magic 2019. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, and welcome to my video. Today we are going to be talking about the Millstone. Those of you who know it will shudder, or some of you, a small fraction, may smile in delight. We're going to talk in depth about this card because it has quite the history. Let us start off by taking a look at what the new incarnation looks like. So, it is 2 colorless casting cost artifact. It costs 2 and you tap it. Target player puts the top 2 cards of the library into their graveyard. And the flavor text says, "Minds like mountains are never so grand and mighty, they can't be reduced to dust." Now that's a pretty solid flavor text. The artwork on this card is absolutely amazing. It's very, very evocative. I mean, there is a minor nitpick in that when it comes to a millstone, essentially what millstones are used for is grinding up grain, things like that. So the grain would be laid between what in this case would be the top of the head there, and then that giant stone that would roll over it. That's how a millstone would normally work. But the way that this looks like is the underlying stone mountain is supposed to represent your opponent, the person who's getting the cards milled off of them. By the way, if you didn't know why everybody calls cards coming off the top of a deck and going to the graveyard milling, this is the reason. That's where it came from. This is the first card. It's been in the game since the beginning, since Alpha. So anyways, the minor nitpick with the artwork is that the thing that would be crushed with a millstone designed like this would be like grains and things like that. So there's no way really for a human's head to get in there and get crushed underneath it, or like there's no way really to picture how the mage is actually being ground down specifically by that millstone if you think of it in that regard. But I prefer to look at it as if the mountainous part underneath is the mage who's being milled, and you can see it's having its effect. It's got the one eye is red. It shows this sort of sentience to it, and the other eye is kind of, it doesn't have the redness to show that the degradation essentially. I like that it's like an old weathered looking face. This has a sense of inevitability. Like this mountain face knows it's going to be worn away into dust because, I mean, look, the millstone is fixed upon it, and slowly and inevitably it is going to wear it away. So, like I said, this card has a massive history. I'm really cool. There you go. Nice little brag in there. Carly chuckling. I'm really cool. I'm a cool guy. All right. So now I guess that's good enough. That's all the video was really meant to be. I'm a cool guy. I'm not even going to edit it out. I'm leaving it in. This isn't some kind of professional operation. Go elsewhere for that. So I'm a cool guy. The card's a cool guy. You're a cool guy. And that's cool, guy. So moving onwards, the card itself, the reprint here for 2019 is really cool. It looks fantastic. The original millstone, I actually find that to be my favorite artwork. Now, that may possibly be partially because that's the one that I played with, right? And that could weigh in. But I feel like when you look at the different artworks, because there's 3 different incarnations of this millstone artwork. The first incarnation is my favorite, where it shows just a stone, the actual millstone, hung in the air. And I always pictured it as like some magic flowing into it. Like, boom, you pay the mana, the magic flows into it, and it just grinds in the air. And the mage, wherever he is just screaming your opponent as his brains being like sandpapered away by this magical stone grinding into it, like essentially. It's just a really cool concept to me. I liked it. And then they came along with the 7th edition version where it was like the millstone was rolling down a hill, and I didn't like that. It felt more like, the card felt more like something that would be used to damage a creature. It had more like a feeling of like force and attack. I mean, I get that it was wearing a rut in the ground, but still, though, that's just the artwork though. So in terms of why this is one of the most hated artifacts, nowadays it's not going to get the same level of hate because, first of all, milling has come a long way. You need to understand that Magic back in the day was a much slower game. So the millstone was far more annoying because it was denying people resources. Plus, people didn't understand as much. Like, they didn't understand that gut reaction they have to watching a card go by into the graveyard. Like, if you were using Millstones, which was a card I absolutely loved using. In fact, it was in my first tournament winning deck. Basically, your opponent would freak out when cards they thought they needed would go by, and they would just end up getting really, really upset when they were playing against a Millstone. And that's why you have the Just stop. This is wrong. No. Or like all the, like literally the stuff that's in the thumbnail is stuff that was said about this card. Now there are additional layers that make Millstone even more of a nightmare in the past. And that is that we didn't understand the game as well in terms of randomization, and we had different rules. There are things we did back then that are straight up illegal in Magic now, but not only were common practice, that's how you explained to people how to do it. And if I'm not mistaken, it might have even been listed in the book. But either way, that's how literally everybody taught people to play Magic. So in this case, what I'm talking about is the land ratio in your deck. Nowadays, there are different rules about the number of lands you should have in your deck to have a good chance when your deck is randomized of getting enough lands to be able to play. But back in the day, and I'm talking mid-90s, right? 94, 95, because that's when I started, guys. That was when Millstone was elbow-dropping suckers. So how it worked back then with lands was your deck was 1/3 lands. Real simple. You're playing a 60-card deck, no problem. You go 40-card non-land, 20-card lands. Everybody did it. Every single person, as if it was a written rule of the game. On top of always making sure that your deck was 1/3 land, everybody would set their decks up. Now it's considered stacking your deck. It's considered mana weaving, whatever you want to call it. It's illegal, where essentially you would go 2 cards land, 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 until your entire deck was assembled, and then you shuffle up and play. Now, you're not allowed to do that anymore. You have to completely randomize your deck, but that's how we used to do things. Now, why is this important? This is part of what made Millstone such an absolute nightmare, because with a little bit of shuffling, most of the deck is still set up in that 2-card land scenario. So depending on when you hit them with the Millstone and the scenario you were looking to keep them in, you could either hit them where they weren't going to be able to get their lands, or you were able to keep them landlocked, which was the most common move people like to do with Millstones. Basically, it's like, okay, if your deck is 2 cards land, 2 cards land, 2 cards land, and I can mill 2 cards off the top of your deck, and both those cards are not lands, and then you draw a land, and I mill you again, both those cards aren't lands, and then you draw a land, most of the time it's going to take a while to break through that, if you ever do. It's incredibly frustrating to be held under, because all you're doing is just drawing lands. You're denied, basically you're denied all of your spells. It was absolutely brutal, and it would make people get like super rage, because honestly, concessions didn't happen back then. Nobody quit games of Magic. There was only one guy I knew who would rage quit games of Magic, and he would only do it during the first turn, and only if I could mess with his first turn Birds of Paradise, and only against me. He would play me normally, but if I could get rid of his first turn birds, he would rage quit. But other than that, nobody conceded. So it was always a slow grind. The games took much longer. They'd be landlocked games, so you had much longer to draw your cards. The Millstone felt incredibly oppressive for the time. And like I said, I won my first tournament with that. I put it into a bunch of decks. My favorite, wonkiest deck with the Millstone, and this is absolutely absurd, was 4 of every circle of protection. So you got your circle red, circle black, circle blue, circle green, and whichever one I just missed, because I'm not just going to keep saying all the colors over and over like a fool. So I had all 5 of the circles of color, and what they do is basically pay 1 mana, pick a source. The next time that source is going to do damage to you, prevent it all. So I played with 20 of the cards in my deck were circles of protection. 20 of the cards in my deck were the old school laces. Now these were some of the worst rares known to mankind, okay? Let's take, for example, I'm going to pick Life Lace. 1 green, okay? It's an instant. No, it's an interrupt, isn't it? It's an interrupt. That's right, because that's old school types. So, interrupt. It lets you change the color of a spell or a card in play to green. That's all it does for 1 green as an instant. And that was a rare. And that was a rare in alpha, beta, unlimited, revised. Imagine getting that instead of a dual land or a Black Lotus or an ancestral. Anyhow, I played with 20 circles, 20 laces to change the colors of cards, and 4 millstones. So I would just sit there and mill their deck away while I hid behind my goofy little circles of protection, being like, nice Shivan Dragon you got over there. Oh, I don't have a circle red for it? No problem. I will make your Shivan Dragon white. It's a pure laced Shivan Dragon. It's so pure now. Send it on over. Circle white. Mill, mill, mill. Stop it! Oh my god. I absolutely loved it. I love Millstone. It's one of my favorite cards. I remember back in the day when Mana Crypt came out, card you could only get in the books. You had to send away for it in the mail. And a 0 casting cost artifact that taps for 2 colorless mana. under the old rules of Magic, if it was tapped during your upkeep, you didn't have to do the negative side, which was to flip a coin, and if you lose the coin flip, you take 3 damage. But if you tapped it during the upkeep, you didn't have to do that. So basically, you could put this thing out on the first turn, 0 mana. I'll play Mana Crypt, tap it, put out a Millstone, and then each turn during your upkeep, I'll tap the Mana Crypt to activate the Millstone, so you'd get to mill them for 2 during each one of their upkeeps, while you still had your lands open to do whatever you want. It was dirty as hell. Millstone was absolutely amazing. It was incredible, until she came along and ruined everything!
And remember, together, we are the 6th color of Magic.
I'm really cool